This is Ringler Radio, where you get all the latest news and information about settlement solutions, litigation, mediation, and structured financial security from Ringler, the largest and most experienced company of settlement consultants in the United States. Ringler has been helping injured people and their families since 1975. Ringler Radio is made possible in part by American General, Liberty Mutual, MetLife, Mutual of Omaha, New York Life, Pacific Life, and Prudential. Now join Ringler Radio host Larry Cohen.
Well, hello and welcome to Ringler Radio, everyone. I'm Larry Cohen, the head of Ringler's Northeast Operations, and we're certainly glad you could join us again today. Well, there have been reports across the world of exploding Samsung cell phones, specifically the Galaxy Note 7. Samsung cell phone owners were either getting burned from explosions or the explosions themselves were causing severe property damage. And Samsung Electronics then recalled all of its Galaxy Note 7 smartphones in over 10 countries after finding batteries in some of these devices were exploding or catching fire. After the recall, some of the replacement phones to customers were still catching fire, leaving Samsung in a very tough situation. So today on Ringler Radio, we're going to take a look at the recent problems with Samsung cell phones from a consumer protection and litigation perspective. And joining me today to help in that discussion is my co-host, my friend and Ringler colleague, Bob Caples. Bob's the managing associate of our Houston office, and after spending 11 successful years as a structured settlement consultant with another firm, Bob joined Ringler in 2007. So with that, glad you came on board, Bob, and glad you're here as my co-host.
Well, thank you, Larry. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be with you, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Terrific. And our special guest today is Jean Stonebarger, founder of Stonebarger Law, APC, in Folsom, California. Jean argued the seminal privacy rights case Pineda versus Williams-Sonoma in the California Supreme Court, which issued a unanimous decision in favor of protecting the privacy rights of California consumers. So welcome to the show, Jean, and that sounds like quite a feather in your cap to have done that.
Oh, thank you very much, Larry. Appreciate that. Yeah, it was a great experience.
No, it had to have been, especially in those California courts. Very interesting. Well, Jean, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your firm and how you got involved in the Samsung device litigation? It's quite an interesting trip, I'm sure.
Sure. I grew up in California. All my family is actually in agriculture. When I moved up from the University of San Diego after I graduated from law school and worked for a firm in Modesto where we represent a lot of agricultural clients, the first case I got put on was representing 500 farmers, and it was a class action. So that got me in the class action environment, and it gave me a skill set. And then I was 28 years old. I opened up a firm 2003 in Sacramento. It was Lindsay and Stonebarger, and started prosecuting some class actions, also doing some other work to keep the lights on during the pendency of the cases. I mean, these cases take anywhere from 2 to 10 years. Sometimes can be even longer.
Mm-hmm. And how about the Samsung device litigation? What led you into that?
Sure. Well, I got a phone call from an attorney who was referring the case to me. Most all of my cases come from other attorney referrals because they know I specialize in class action litigation, and we do some mass tort litigation as well. And so this was a referral from an attorney where the client was Brandon Covert, and Brandon, after talking with him and hearing his story, I was really shocked by it.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Brandon's case. We're going to talk about him specifically a little bit later in the show, and I think it's going to be fascinating for the audience to hear all that. But that's a good intro to where we're going to go today.
Jean, that is interesting. And why don't we start by discussing the issues with the Samsung cell phones, specifically the Galaxy Note 7, the recall of this device, and the ban from airplanes?
Right. So what we've seen is a progression of awareness relating to some of the Samsung devices. I mentioned Brandon Covert's phone. We'll come back to that. That was an S6 Active. His phone exploded actually about 2 weeks before Samsung issued the Note 7s, and they were aware of that. And they were aware of numerous instances of prior models exploding, heating up, overheating, and burning people and causing all kinds of issues prior to the Note 7. Now, the Note 7 was then released, and over the next 45 days, I think there was approximately 150 incidences reported of the phones exploding. That led into the recall, which, of course, led into replacement Note 7s being issued, which those replacement phones themselves actually overheated and were exploding. And one instance occurred in Southwest Flight in Kentucky, which I think we've all heard about.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing to have, not just the original phones having the explosion, but the replacement phones also having problems. So, what kind of injuries and property damage were you seeing with these Samsung cell phones?
Right, and our complaints list out a history of reports, of consumer reports, and so, for example, the Consumer Product Safety Commission has reports going back to the S2 and S3 models, S4, S5, S6, X7, and numerous examples such as the Galaxy Note 2 became hot and large amount of smoke and sparks were coming from the phone, leaving burn marks and a hole in the carpet, for instance. And without reading off all these, I mean, what we see is a pattern of phones overheating, consumers being burned physically, either in their pockets, their pants, on their hands. We've seen incidences of phones burning one's face up to the ear, kids getting burned, playing with the phones. We all know how much kids love that. And we've heard of incidences of phones exploding that are charging in vehicles and exploding and, in fact, burning the whole vehicle to the ground. What happened in Florida. And then, of course, the biggest fear, which is the phones exploding on airplanes. Now, that raises a real significant issue, and it's an issue that really crosses over both on air travel and on the road. And I don't mean to be a fearmonger, have people really worried that this is going to happen any given second. But the point is, there's a significant risk of it, and that is, if you have one of these devices in your vehicle or in the air, you now have not only a responsibility to yourself, but you have a responsibility to other members of the public, right? So you have to keep a real close eye on this. So there's a stigma now associated with having that Samsung phone. And you don't want to be the guy that has the phone that explodes, that takes down an airplane or causes an accident that causes significant injury or death. And that's really my biggest concern.
No question. Well, Jean, that's so interesting, and you're right about the responsibility to the public. I can't imagine driving along in an automobile and all of a sudden the phone starts getting on fire, explodes, and not only am I concerned about the inside of the car, but who knows where that steering wheel is going to go when I get jolted like that. So you're right about that. But let's talk about your experiences now with your client Brandon Covert, because that experience with his Samsung device really led to one of your first cases, right?
Well, Brandon's case was our first case filed. That was a personal injury action. We have filed another personal injury action since then, and then on the heels of that, we filed a class action relating to the phones that are S6, S7, Note 5 models. So I'll come back to that. But to answer your question about Brandon's situation, so Brandon went to bed on August 2nd, and he plugged his phone in just like I do every night next to my bedstand, and he went to bed with his wife and a 7-month-old infant daughter. And at 2 a.m, he heard a loud explosion. He described as a gunshot. He jumped to his feet, and he saw his Galaxy S6 Active on fire, shooting flames 4 to 5 inches high out of the phone. The room was filling with smoke. His dresser was on fire, and so he's obviously panicking that moment. Grabs the nearest T-shirt he can find, throws it over his phone, grabs the phone, runs it out of the room to try to, keep his wife and child safe, and throws it into the sink in the kitchen. And I mean, really, the whole house was filled with fire, and what remained of the phone was just a contorted pile of metal, plastic, glass. And I don't know if you've seen the picture of that phone yet, but it's really something.
Interesting.
So, yeah, so and it's so bad the smell remained for weeks, and the smell on the dresser itself and the burn on the dresser itself remained for months. But the trauma remains for a lot longer than that, and because when you go to bed at night, you have to think about, is my phone going to explode, or do I have to worry about this harming and bringing my house down in the middle of the night? It's the similar fear of the driving on an airplane. And the bottom line is, consumers shouldn't have to live in fear that they're walking around with a ticking time bomb in their pocket, right? Or that their phone's going to catch on fire in the middle of the night in their home. And unfortunately, like for my client, Brandon Covert, he is not a wealthy individual. He can't afford to just throw, the replacement phone away and go buy another type of cell phone, right? He doesn't have $500,000 laying around. I can't, unfortunately, give him money to go do that. As an attorney, I'm ethically barred from doing anything like that. But so he has to have this fear, and he has to have a phone to function because, now in today's society, as we know, I mean, phones are some of the most, if not one of the most intimate objects that you carry, which connects you with the world, connects you with, it's a computer in your pocket, everything that, most of the things you do relates around that phone. Right. So Brandon, needed a replacement phone. Samsung's response was just, he was told to send the phone back to them, and they would send him a replacement. Eventually, he was sent a replacement. He was actually charged for the replacement phone. We were able to get AT&T not to charge him for that phone. But nonetheless, he still has the same Galaxy S6 active phone that he does not want to have anymore. And we have and I think a lot of individuals in that same situation, whether their phone has blown up or it's not blown up. And what makes the S6 active so dangerous and similar to the Note 7 is it contains exactly the same battery. It's got the same 3500 mAh power.
No question about that. Bob?
Well, Gene, I tell you, anybody that's listening can conjure up the frightening scenario that Brandon experienced, and that's horrifying for any of us to hear. Let me ask you, it sounds like that Samsung might have a bigger problem on their hands with problems with the other models and the replacement phones.
Absolutely. Look, Samsung has a bigger problem on their hands beyond the Note 7. I know that from my clients' phones exploding. They're not Note 7s, right? So I have a client, Brandon, with the Note S6 Active that exploded, and we have a client, Demetrius Martin, that had an S6 Edge that exploded and burned his carpet, and he's one of the plaintiffs on our class case. And then we have examples of numerous other models that have experienced the same issues. With regard to other models beyond the S6 Active, like I said, that has a 3500 mAh battery capacity, the same exact battery capacity as the Note 7. Now, the S7 Edge and the S7 Active actually have greater battery capacities, meaning they're stronger batteries. That's the 3600 for the S7 Edge and 3900 for the S7 Active. So in other words, there's more powerful batteries that are on the market beyond these 3500 mAhs. And that's, significant in that, my opinion and viewing this, from my lens is that Samsung, in an effort to compete and become the leader in the smartphone market, created batteries that they manufactured themselves more recently that were self-contained within the phones in the S6, S7, Note 7, Note 5 models, self-contained, they couldn't be removed. But that these batteries, lithium-ion batteries that were made to charge faster, last longer, be more powerful, ultimately became much more dangerous. And the lithium-ion fluid that's contained in the batteries, when it heats up to a certain temperature, starts flaming and searching for oxygen, and that's what creates the enclosed bomb, where you have flame looking for oxygen in an enclosed cell. And so that's that's my view of the technical issue on it. And now Samsung and all manufacturers that utilize lithium-ion batteries, they know the lithium-ion batteries are dangerous. Consumers don't necessarily appreciate that risk because they're not told about it always, and they weren't told about it in the Samsung situation. However, the lithium-ion batteries are dangerous, and so a lot of manufacturers put in safety precautions, both software and hardware, redundant methodologies to prevent an overheating and prevent an explosion like this.
Jean, it's easy to sit back and hear about the Samsung smartphone issues and the battery problems and the explosions, and somehow you have this broad indictment of Samsung as a company. But, I have a Samsung TV. I know a lot of people that do, and you may even have some. And, I think as a company, we've got to be careful not to indict the entire company for this issue that obviously needs to be dealt with.
I have Samsung TVs at my home. In fact, 3 out of 4 of my TVs are Samsung TVs, and I've always viewed Samsung as an exceptional product. And I'm not sure that there's any issues with the TVs or any other products other than their smartphones. As a company, the whole Samsung, of course, has been a very successful company. They're one of the wealthiest companies in the world. They have huge successes beyond their smartphones, although they do have over 22% of the smartphone market worldwide. That's double the next highest, which is Apple at 11%.
Jean, it seems that Samsung is still selling cell phones despite documented explosions. Can they do that legally? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. Well, if you look back at the Note 7 scenario, Samsung became under a lot of pressure from the U.S. government to issue the recall, and they did that, and that was also in conjunction with the U.S. government and the federal aviation authorities, refusing to allow and actually preventing Note 7 devices from even being allowed on the plane. So it takes government pressure, and here hopefully the results of our litigation will cause Samsung to recall the models at issue that we have listed in our complaint, which are the S6, S6 Edge, S6 Edge Plus, S7, S6 Active, S7 Edge, S7 Active, and the Note 5. Those particular Galaxy and S and Note series models are problematic because they have similar dangerous lithium-ion batteries. Samsung has not identified the root source of the problem, therefore has not indicated what the fix is for the problem. And each of the models that I've listed out contain batteries that are self-contained within the device. The prior models, S5, S4, going down, those had batteries that were removable. So you could take the batteries actually out of the phone if you felt like it was overheating or something. You don't have that option with these. And so that requires a recall of the entire device rather than a recall of just the battery itself. And frankly, we don't know that just to recall the battery itself, even on those other devices, would be sufficient because Samsung has not yet identified the root source of the problem. As far as what they say it is.
That's really the essence of this whole issue, is what is the real problem. It's obviously a battery issue, we know that, but we don't know whether it's because it's permanently in there and can't breathe, so to speak, or some other issue. So I'm sure that'll come out in the litigation that you're really involved with here. So let's take a quick break right now and be back in a minute right here on Ringler Radio with our special guest, Jean Stonebarger. We'll be right back.
This is Ringler Radio, brought to you from Ringler, the nation's leading provider of fair settlement solutions. Did you know that Ringler is involved in a third of all structured settlement cases in the country? Ringler advisors work with all the parties in a lawsuit settlement to find the best possible financial solution for the people involved. Everybody wins. There's a Ringler consultant in all the major cities of the U.S. No one has more experienced experts in the settlement business than Ringler. Check out our website at www.ringlerassociates.com for the best information for injured parties, attorneys, and claims professionals to find the Ringler advisor nearest you. When it's your interests at stake in a lawsuit settlement, you want only the best, most objective financial plan. You can count on Ringler advisors to create a customized plan that meets the financial needs of you and your family for the future. Visit ringlerassociates.com to learn more.
Well, welcome back to Ringler Radio, everyone. Glad you could join us. I'm your host, Larry Cohen, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Bob Caples, from Ringler's Houston, Texas office, and our special guest, Jean Stonebarger, founder of Stonebarger Law, APC, in Folsom, California. And, of course, we're discussing the explosion issues surrounding Samsung cell phones and the litigation stemming from these defective products. And, Jean, what are we going to see in the future? How does that look? Are we going to see a lot more cases? Do you sense that this is kind of the tip of the iceberg, or right, are we in the middle of the process?
Oh, I definitely think we're at the beginning of the process. I think it is the tip of the iceberg. More and more phones are overheating, catching fire, and exploding around the world every day. So it's bringing more attention to the issue. As far as litigation goes, it remains to be seen how many additional cases will be filed. From the class action perspective, we're representing a class of California consumers. Although I expect there would be some other cases filed in other states. And then from the perspective of the personal injury cases, that's anyone that has a phone that is caught on fire, exploded, and harmed them, in their personal being, whether they've been burned or otherwise injured, then they'll have an individual claim against Samsung for strict liability, manufacturing defects, etc. And so, however many of those cases are filed, ultimately these cases will be centralized, and the court system will determine where they get sent and which judge oversees the processes. So that's where we are right now at the beginning of that process, to see what happens ultimately with a coordination of any additional cases that were filed.
Jean, since your initial contact with anything related to these Samsung devices to this point, where undoubtedly you've done a lot of homework, due diligence into learning about these products and the consequences of what they can create, I'm kind of curious, have you made a determination of what Samsung should have done differently?
Well, just generally, as far at this point, what I think Samsung should have done differently with regard to the recalls is recall all of the models of the Galaxy S and Note series. However, going back in time, with 2020 vision, what Samsung should have done differently with regard to how they build their phones and design their phones. All I can speak to is from a general standpoint, which is, number one, don't put dangerous products in the market that have the potential for exploding, so do more testing. Just as an aside, there was no Note 6 model. It went from Note 5 to Note 7. So I don't know, maybe they did testing on the Note 6 and it didn't come out well. However, the Note 7 did come out, and they obviously either did not do sufficient testing on the product, or they did do testing and they knowingly put a dangerous product out on the market. Either way, they knew that there was a significant risk of danger on this product, and so what they really needed to do at the front end, at the very least, was put disclosures on the products, which highlight and explain to consumers there's a substantial risk of, or at least I should say there is a risk of substantial injury, right? So there might not be, maybe there's only a 1% chance of the phone exploding, but you don't want to take that chance, right? If you're letting your kid play with it, or if you're going into the public with the phone, even if there's a very small percentage of my phone acting like it's a bomb in my pocket, I don't want to take on that. I don't want to take on that risk, right? So I'm not going to ever purchase that product. Whereas maybe someone would, but they're going to pay a lot less for it, right? So anyway, those are some of the things I think Samsung should have done and could have done differently from the beginning.
Sure, and you're right. The decision of what phone to buy and why to buy it. I mean, this is what's really important about what people like you do in the legal arena. You bring these product issues to our attention, to the public's attention, and hopefully it'll solve or prevent a lot of other people from getting injured. But let me wrap this up now by asking your advice about anyone who might already have been injured because of a defective Samsung device, or if the device caused some property damage, or someone gets into a problem with the phone. What's your advice to those people? What should they do? Well,
I mean, I'm happy to talk with, or staff in my office would be happy to talk with anyone that contacted us, either my firm at StonebargerLaw.com or my co-counsel. It's out of Burlingame, the San Francisco Bay Area. That's Kachette, Petrie, and McCarthy. Or if you're outside of California, you could always contact an attorney within your jurisdiction first, or if you don't know of one, we have attorneys around the country that we know that are good attorneys that we've worked with previously on cases. So, I think that if you've been injured, you need to take some steps to protect your legal rights and to make sure that you recover for those injuries. If you haven't been injured and you have a phone that you're concerned about, then you can move forward and talk to some attorneys about the potential of a case on that front. But with regard to Californians, they would, once the class is certified in our case, meaning a judge says, yeah, this moves forward as a class action, all those individuals in California would be included in our case already. You wouldn't have to actively sign that. Well, that's good advice for anyone out there that has had a problem, and of course anyone out there who hasn't had a problem but is thinking about buying a smartphone. You've been forewarned here by Jean and others on what some of the dangers are of these devices. And technology is great, but we got to constantly be vigilant about how sometimes it can get a little out of hand. Well, Jean, if someone wanted to contact you I'm sure you have a website. That would probably be a good place to start. What is your website? Sure. My website is StonebargerLaw.com, and you can find all of our information on that. Terrific. That's easy. Very easy. And that's easy, yeah. No question. And Bob, if someone wanted to talk to you about structured settlements or talk to you generally about any of these issues, how would they get a hold of you?
Thanks, Larry. They could always find me on my bio page on RinglerAssociates.com and by reaching me at area code 281-937-9090. Terrific.
And anyone out there that wants to reach any Ringler associate all around the country to deal with structured settlements, you can always find us on RinglerAssociates.com. It's a great website. I encourage you to go there. It's got a lot of great information about a lot of different subject matters. And in the meantime, if you want to listen to a Ringler radio show, not only this radio show, but any of the radio shows we've done, and we've done hundreds of them on great topics, you can find them on RinglerAssociates.com, or you can find them on RinglerRadio.com, LegalTalkNetwork.com, or you can go to iTunes where you can download this particular show, for example, and listen to it at your leisure on your smartphone, but we know which one you're not going to listen to it on, don't we now? So with that, I want to thank you very much, Jean, for being a special guest. Thanks again for all your great information.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
And Bob, again, thanks for being a great co-host.
Thanks, Larry, for having me. I appreciate it.
And for the rest of you out there, go out and have a great day. Bye-bye.
The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer. Thanks for listening to Ringler Radio, celebrating more than a decade of podcasting and over 2 million listeners. Think of Ringler, The Objective Settlement Advisors, with more than 140 consultants in 60 cities nationwide. Visit ringlerassociates.com today.